What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Nutrition Hero Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. By the way, thank you for 5-starring us on iTunes and subscribing and hitting that thumbs up button on YouTube. It helps us reach more people with this message of the functional medicine movement. Today's episode is all about leadership, and I want you to follow along a conversation I recorded with a gentleman who has become a friend of mine. His name is Staff Sergeant Jeff Wild. He's an Army Special Forces Green Beret, an ODA Team Member of the 3rd Special Forces Group. He's an intense individual, and Jeff is a recently discharged Green Beret medic who's dedicated his life to helping elite soldiers of our military reacclimate to civilian life through coaching and mentorship. He's a functional medicine advocate and can be reached by the contact information in the podcast notes below. If you or a loved one or any of your patients are in the situation that you're going to be listening to today, reach out, and he is there to be of service. So please enjoy the conversation with one of the more intense individuals I've interviewed on this show, Mr. Jeff Wilds. All right, we are here with Mr. Jeff Wilds. Jeff, thank you for being on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Today I'm excited to talk, listen. I'm excited to hear about some of the leadership lessons that you learned with your career in the military and some of the stuff that you got to go through. So thank you for indulging my curiosity.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see what questions you ask me.
Absolutely. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with kind of a background for the listeners here so they know who you are, how you ended up in the military, and then how you worked your way into a leadership role in the Green Beret, Special Forces. So can we start in the beginning? When did you know that you were going to be a military guy? When did that come about?
Well, we have a long military history in our family, and it was always in the back of my head. And then 9/11 happened, and it was just a no-brainer.
So it went from back to front of the head immediately?
Very rapidly.
Okay. All right. So what were you doing when 9/11 happened, and was it like an immediate go find the military office I'm in, or what was the situation there?
Well, I never make decisions in haste, but I was working full-time for my dad's company, actually, installing satellite dishes.
Okay.
And when 9/11 happened, I was up on top of a rooftop putting a satellite dish on some farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere. And the lady came out and got me and brought me inside. And she said, "You got to see this." And I saw it. And that day I knew that my aspirations to help people were going to feed through the military.
Okay.
But I hadn't decided where. And
gotcha. Like what branch?
What branch and all that, because my dad was a Marine, my sister was in the Air Force,
okay.
My other uncle was in the Army.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of branch jokes in our family and everything. So
all right.
hadn't decided my direction quite yet.
Okay. So how long after 9/11 did you say, "Here's what I'm going to do"?
Approximately 2 months.
2 months.
I went into actually the Air Guard right here out of Fort Snelling and became part of a aeromedical unit. So that means like flying to pick up mass casualty patients and flying them out. And I was the gopher, go for this, go for that, for that unit. All right. Good entry level military job.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so it builds stock, though, is what it does, yep. I would imagine. So what were some of your jobs in that as a part of the Air Guard? Were you deployed as part of the Air Guard, or were you in reserve? What was going on there?
Yep, volunteered. So I was in the Guard, but I volunteered for deployment almost right away. Ended up spending a little over 4 months in Qatar and Kuwait and a few other places that were right around Iraq, because that was right when it was really kicking off and getting serious.
Yeah.
And just learned a lot about what it's like to be deployed, learned a lot about how much equipment and effort and people it takes to make warfare really happen.
Yeah.
And what it means for people to hold the rope, so to say, in their actual position.
Okay. That's interesting to me, because when you say make warfare happen, I have never been in the military, obviously, And I have maybe one or two family members that I can remember that have been in the military, but it wasn't anything that anybody ever talked about. So when you talk about holding the rope, what do you mean in that, like a responsibility situation? What do you mean by that?
Well, everybody plays their part, no matter what their role is. Whether you're special forces or you're, doing whatever job. If you're shuffling boxes around in a warehouse somewhere, that all plays a part in moving towards the effort. And sometimes it's too far away for you to see the results.
Gotcha.
And so in that job, I didn't get to see a ton of the results, but I still did my job every day with pride and diligence because I knew the end result.
Okay, so did the pride and diligence come from your training, or did the pride and diligence come from maybe who you are as a person? What do you like? Was it instilled in you?
Yes, very much so. My dad being a Marine, in Vietnam, he had every level of job. Some of them he was running the mess hall for a while, where he was just making guys breakfast every day. And other days he was out in the woods, being or out in the jungle. Sorry, putting up antennas and drawing fire and IEDs and stuff, or IDF. So
interesting.
That's where that idea came from, because it's easy to get disgruntled when you don't see the result of what you're doing.
That's what I imagined. So specifically when somebody, like a lot of the doctors or nutritionists listening to this podcast, they own businesses and obviously with employees that they have to train and keep engaged and that type of stuff. One of the things I appreciate about what we've talked about in the past is the honor that is instilled in your job, even if the job isn't the one that gets the medal put on the vest at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So can we talk a little bit about that and how, even as you describe an Air Force grunt, there's honor in that. How do you connect to that in a job that's kind of thankless?
For me now, looking back, I think I have a better vision of it than I did when I was in it.
Okay.
So when you're in an area remote, the base of the Himalayas on the border of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and you need a chopper, you need supplies, you need whatever. When you have a guy that's supplying you with that, it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. So for anybody that's receiving the treatment, whether they know it or not, the person who gave that to them is making a huge impact. And how I relate this, when you were speaking, I was thinking about the average ER doctor. They help people, then a lot of times don't ever see them again. If they did their job right, they don't see them again.
Right. Hopefully.
And that's their whole job. So they never get that response back or that feedback back that they did it right a lot of times.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And it's the same way for us. I mean, when I work with Teed Up for the Troops, an organization, they do a reunion weekend every year. And it's because your family that you were with when you were deployed, if one of them gets injured and they're medevaced out, you may never see them again.
Gotcha.
Because they go from Afghanistan to Germany to Rhine-Main or whatever, and you don't follow the same path.
Right.
You stay there. You stay working.
Right.
You never see them again, but so you don't get that feedback sometimes, and that can be an illusion that allows people to get disgruntled when they shouldn't be.
Right. So in the military, then, do they specifically address that? Like, if I'm a doctor running a team, right? That's what I'm saying. If I'm a doctor running a team right now in a clinic, and I'm trying to avoid employees being disgruntled because of the, whether or not it's not a glamorous job necessarily, right? They may not be the ones sitting behind the desk or their name on the door, but the name on the door and the one behind the desk don't matter. if the operations aren't there. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I think that's important to recognize. Is there a selection process in the military like that where you weed out people that are going to be disgruntled, or is it handled like, hey, here's your job, here's why it's important, don't ever forget it?
In Special Forces, there is.
In Special Forces?
Absolutely.
How so? What is that like?
Well, over the course of a couple of years that it takes to become a Green Beret,
Yeah.
every day your body's broken down, beaten down, and you can quit at any moment.
Uh-huh.
So the disgruntled don't last long. And on top of that, it's an extreme marathon. So I always tell people this way. This is how you describe the toughness that it takes to become a Green Beret. When you go for a run and you get too far out, or you had wet socks or whatever,
Yeah.
you get a blister and you power through the rest of that run. You feel really good, right? And you're like, man, I'm tough. But getting up and doing it a couple hours later or the next day with that blister still there, to start that way and do it again and then do it the next day and have to tape your foot in order to make it so you can keep going without, turning your feet into too much hamburger.
Right.
It's a different mindset. It's a different level of toughness that I believe you can only get by breaking down your body over time and then challenging your mindset in the same way.
So, all right. So let's go from, with that in mind, let's go from the Air Force. How long were you in the Air Force?
A little over 3 years.
3 years. And then at that point, did you put in for a transfer, or did you, what's the situation like going from the Air Force and then deciding I want to be a Green Beret? What's in that entail?
Well, my sister, who's in the Air Force, said that I had to get a head injury to go from the Air Force to the Army. But I'll joking aside. I actually wanted to be a pararescueman in the Air Force, and they wouldn't take me because I wasn't a prior service combat job.
Okay.
To put it plainly, so I actually got walked across the hall from an Air Force recruiter to an Army recruiter, and he pitched me on becoming a Green Beret, and I wasn't really listening. But he did give me a couple of websites.
Yeah.
And so I started looking into it and basically realized that job was a better fit for me anyway.
Okay, which says a lot about you, by the way.
Thanks. But it was really hard to get a contract, actually. When you sign up for the military, people don't realize that you're signing a contract, just like you would for any major league sports team. So you're signing a contract for an amount of time for a job, and when you sign one that is for Special Forces, everything is dependent on whether you quit and whether you perform enough to make it. So if you don't make it, you become needs of the Army, which basically means that they're putting you into the job that nobody else wants to do.
Right.
So with the percentage being so low of people who actually make it from a transfer from the Air Force into Special Forces, they probably basically thought they were getting the needs for the Army guy.
Sure. All right.
And
like a toilet scrubber.
I made it.
Okay.
Well, whatever.
Right.
So
you went, you applied, and then first day, do you remember the first day? Like showing up with the Army and being like, all right, ready to go. What was the first day like?
Well, it's basic training all over again.
Was it?
So because I wasn't in a combat job before, I actually had to go through not only what they called prior service basic training, specifically for transfers from non-combat jobs, straight into infantry school, which is basic training again.
Gotcha.
So I've basically been through basic training 3 times.
3 times? Okay. Not for lack of passing, I hope?
Nope. Never had an issue.
All right.
Slid through it like smooth as butter. I can blend in with anybody, the best of them.
So what is the mentality like, maybe from a motivation or inspiration? Maybe it's inspiration that I'm talking about, but going from a non-combat job in the Air Force to training your body up and your mind up with systems and procedures for a combat job. What is it inspiration? Is it motivation? What's the difference there?
I'm going to use a different word. I'm going to say belief.
Belief?
The end belief in what you're doing and the difference you can make.
Okay.
So for me, I looked at from the very beginning, as soon as I decided that I wanted to be a Green Beret, I looked at it as I was going to be the medic right there for the most courageous men on the planet.
Uh-huh.
And that's the way I looked at it right away. I wanted to serve those guys that were willing to take greater risk for the safety of my family and friends than anybody else out there.
Yeah.
And that motivated me to be in that elite group and serve them in that way.
I can feel that. Like I have this thing where I get goosebumps when I can tell when something's real. So when you say belief and then you deliver like that, I can feel it. That's intense. So that belief, is it? Do you get that belief by being around people of the same mindset, or do you get that belief? Was that in you already? Maybe both. Yeah.
Both. Especially in today's society, it's real easy to get disgruntled in pretty much anything, right? We have the news, we have all this negativity that's around us all the time, questioning everything, more information than we need about anything. And it's really easy to get confused on what the overall mission is. So I was challenged when I was going through my clinical rotations in Tampa by OB doctor.
To be a medic.
To be a medic.
Okay.
Yep. And she was like, how can you go to war? How can you do this? And it was funny because if she wasn't in a position of authority, I don't think she would ever ask me, because I've never had anybody else ask me that, right? So I look at it as the challenge has to be to know who you're going to be when things get tough. Like if there was a situation where there was something unethical going on, I know who I'd be in that situation. Gotcha. I know that I'd stand up. I know that I'd do what was right. So for me, there's never an issue about that. I know that my values are strong enough that they're going to power me through it, even if it's a situation where maybe I don't feel like I have any power. I'll find a way. And that mentality, I think, is what has carried me through a lot of it.
Do you think that you know who you are in tough situations because those tough situations you were put in training? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, you learn a lot. Once you're exhausted and dehydrated and sleep deprived, and yes, I use exhausted and sleep deprived because they're different, right? You learn a lot.
So let's go there for a minute. Where did you do your training after you went through Army Basic? Where did you decide, I'm going to be a Green Beret? Let me in. What's the training situation like at that point? Where was that?
Yeah, so a little place that may or may not exist called Camp McCall at Fort Bragg in North Carolina.
Camp McCall.
Camp McCall. There's songs about it. You can look them up. It's hilarious. But anyway, that's where they really figure out who you are. You know, I can't have a conversation with anybody in the military, or honestly a lot of civilians, without them being like, "Oh, I thought about doing that." Like I've seen the stuff on Discovery Channel about being a SEAL or whatever it's called, 2 weeks in hell, and they're like, "I thought about doing that," and I just don't respond most of the time because the distance between thinking about doing it and living it, especially in a job where most people quit during the tryout before the training even starts.
Yeah.
It's that level of breakdown. Once you are exhausted and you can barely function and you are getting confused about your everyday tasks because you're so just
Right.
beat down, who are you going to be in that moment?
Right.
And that's are you going to quit? Are you going to get tempted by a Gatorade at that point? Right? Because it's sugar and your body wants it so bad. Are you going to have somebody come up and say something like, instructors will mess with your head. They'll come right up to you and look you right in the eye and write something down and walk off without saying a word.
Like being evaluated?
Being evaluated.
Really?
So if you've been walking in the woods by yourself for 2 days and then somebody comes up and does that, and you know that you maybe only got, 6 out of 8 points in the STAR course, which is just a land navigation course. But like, it's something that that you didn't max out. You didn't do it perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at any point you can make it through the whole tryout, which is crazy hard.
Okay.
And you can get to the end and not be selected. And then it's
really, so it's not like a pass it and you're in. It's like get to the end and you're in. It's not a war of attrition. It's actually like a graded situation.
Absolutely. So
get to the end, and while everybody else quit, you get to the end and you still might not get selected.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Which is probably the hardest part about it.
Okay.
Because you're constantly evaluating yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to evaluate yourself, right? All that stuff that happens in combat, in certain things. I mean, everybody experiences it. You got a hard test in college. You're self-evaluating yourself immediately as soon as that test is over.
Sure.
Oh man, I should have studied harder, whatever. I mean, it's college, so
maybe
you shouldn't have had that beer last night or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're evaluating yourself. And for a lot of people, that can be the biggest drain on you.
Really? Okay, so that's super important here, because if you're going to be functioning at a high level, and you're not even in the Green Beret yet, you're in the weed out course in the camp in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. If you are evaluating yourself in that moment, how do you know what's too much? How do you know how hard to be on yourself?
Physically or mentally?
Both. How do you know?
You don't.
Are you trying, as you're going through this, are you trying to be the best in the group that you're going through it with? Or are you not even aware of that? Are you trying to survive in your own mind?
Both. When you push yourself beyond your limits, most people don't know remotely close to what they're capable of. Uh-huh. So it's commonplace for people to get to the end and have broken bones and not know it. They have broken bones in their foot or whatever. And you don't know if you're one of those people, because everybody's feet hurt. Everybody's limping when they're not like warmed up and getting that blood flowing. Everybody's feet are swollen. Everybody's limping. Everybody's got blisters. So you don't know.
You're right.
So your level of mental toughness and how you drive yourself, you just have to make a decision. What's more important? Letting your future teammates down, in my mind, or worrying about your foot or your knee or whatever, right? And it's a decision that you have to make, and everything becomes a decision. And you can't let any story or anything that has been fed to you, right? Because all you hear going into the course is all the stories, right? Oh, there's a guy that got bit by a snake, and there's guys that broke their leg and didn't know it, and blah blah blah. Like, people just throw these stories at you, especially the guys who didn't make it, who are there, they're waiting to get shipped back to their old unit or whatever, and you're going in. Those guys got story on story on story on why everybody fails, and isn't
that the truth of life? That is the truth of life right there.
And I've never heard one person say that they just quit.
Yeah. Wow.
It's always, oh, I was hurt this way, or I was hurt that way, or whatever. I've never heard anybody just say it was too much, I quit.
Couldn't do it.
And it's maybe it's just them not wanting to admit it, or maybe they just allowed those stories to come in and hack at their mentality, and break them down to the point where they believed it themselves, whether it was true or
Right.
not.
Breaks their belief. Wow. Wow. All right. So how long is this course?
It's varied a lot since I was in it, but I think it was like 24 days or something. I don't know. I knew at the time. I don't remember anymore.
Okay. 24 days. And is it all, like, what type of skills are you doing? You just mentioned orienteering, like you're out in a navigation course for however many days. And what other skills are you going through? Go ahead. I mean,
yeah.
fill me in.
Well, it starts with just a physical breakdown.
Yeah.
So you are, I mean, there's stuff like they call it log PT, where basically you're just doing different maneuvers with a telephone pole with a team of you for seemed like forever.
Really?
And stuff that
with a telephone pole. Okay.
Yeah. And
this is heavy, it's uncomfortable, go move it.
And you're working as a team. So obviously, if you were thinking, I just want to get through this, you may not put out your all. Well, the instructors are standing there watching to look for who's not putting out their all.
Yeah.
Or who's not breaking in the way that they know that you'll break, right? Because anybody can put on an act and be like, oh, yeah, I'm working real hard for the team, and they're not.
Gotcha.
So there's always that. And then...
How big is a team that you're working with?
Oh, it's always different.
Right.
You're moving around, and who knows? It's all a blur.
Okay.
It's all a blur, and they do that on purpose. But
are they training you, like testing skills that you've learned in basic training already, or are these different things like...
Yes, in times.
Okay.
But a lot of, the beginning, the first little while, they're just breaking you down.
Okay.
They're wearing you out. They're exhausting you. They're, getting rid of the people who are just there to get out of a deployment or whatever, because you can apply to get in there. It's kind of annoying.
Get out of a deployment.
It's kind of annoying, but they get rid of those people right away. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, spend 2 days in the woods by yourself. Go.
Yeah.
All right.
So they, and then beyond that, then it becomes, how well can you function when you're exhausted?
Yeah.
How well can you work as a team when you're exhausted?
What does exhausted mean to you? What does that look like?
Well, there's a thing that we do in this course. It's called the rucksack flop. So we're walking around. A rucksack is basically a giant backpack.
Okay.
And it's anywhere from 100 pounds. They always give you a packing list, but they never tell you what it weighs. And you're carrying around at least, I think it's a couple gallons of water at all times. You have to have it on you at the beginning of every event. And you're so exhausted that as soon as you get to the end, it's too tiring to take the sack off your back. So it's become a thing where it's called the rucksack flop. So you just fall backwards, basically.
Really?
So you land right on the rucksack.
Yep.
And then once you get used to it, it's almost like sitting in a chair on the ground then. You got a back support, especially if you pack your rucksack back properly.
Gotcha.
And you can just lean on it. And people fall asleep like that. I've seen people fall asleep while walking, hallucinate. A buddy,
go ahead.
A buddy of mine, this is one of my favorite stories. So we're sitting on an ambush line, like we're practicing doing ambushes, and it was pretty cold and it was wet out. So like that makes it 10 times worse, especially in the middle of the night when you're laying on the ground.
Yeah.
And he started hallucinating, and
what do you mean hallucinating?
Like he thought the instructor came up to him and said, "Hey, if you're not going to stay awake, then go over there and sit in that hot tub." So he got up and started taking off his clothes.
Oh no!
It was sitting on a log in the middle of the woods.
How many days have you been awake at this point? What is that like?
I don't know, a lot. It could. I mean, it's the elements provide a lot of energy loss, especially when it's cold out. Right? Most hypothermia cases happen between 34 and 42 degrees.
Wow.
And when you're wet, the combination of those two, because you're not thinking about it as much.
So your buddy starts to hallucinate.
Yeah.
And you can pick up the story there. I interrupted you. I apologize. He starts to hallucinate, and you're out in the, what are you doing? You're on a rucksack march, or
we're just sitting out in there. We're practicing squad tactics, they're called. Okay. So squad maneuvers that we do in combat. And he just straight up hallucinated. And that's the funniest story. That's why I tell that one. But there's many others where people are just confused and disoriented and stuff. And, there's medical personnel there to watch out for the people that are really in danger.
Yeah.
But everybody's on the brink of truly breaking their body down.
Okay, so these people then that you make it through this class with, you're doing ambush tactics, and you guys are learning things that you're actually going to have to use out in the field. And then these people that you're going through all of these maneuvers with, how many of them end up active Green Berets? I don't know if you know a percentage or not, but
not very many.
Really?
I mean,
like if you got 100 guys,
I don't think anybody really knows because. So just in the beginning, the first month, like the tryout, as I said, there was like, my last name's Wild, so I was close to the end of the alphabet, and so there, like, I knew that there was like 500 and some guys there.
Wow.
Right. In the beginning, and everybody's wearing their roster number and all that because they don't bother to learn your names because you won't be around long enough. But
501 over here.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't know, I was like 524 or something like that. Okay. So, and at the end they selected right around 100. Well, that's the first month. So that's where they decide that they think that you're trainable.
Wow.
And they think that you might have a shot.
Okay.
Well, after that, there's like 12 more courses where at any time you say I quit or can't handle the stress or, whatever. Maybe you have a kid and you decide this job isn't for you anymore.
Right. It gets real pretty quick, I bet.
You're gone or you don't perform.
And you weren't married and you didn't have a kid at this point when you're going through.
Correct.
Okay. So you're an athlete before you got into any of this stuff in the first place.
Yes.
And how much of your athletic background and mental toughness and that type of stuff played into you keeping your hand raised? Like, I'm good. I'm going.
A lot.
Yeah?
A lot. So I think I played hockey and trained really hard for it growing up. I had, I could squat a ton of weight, but I could also run long distances. I was kind of an original athlete when it came to that mix because most guys who can lift heavy can't run long distance. Well, I played sports that did both, right? So that was a big part of it. The way my dad raised me, working really hard to just build my character and my discipline and my work ethic played a huge part. But even after all that, I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Okay, so this is super intriguing to me because I feel like in a gross misrepresentation of what you put yourself through and then what we're going to get to talk about here in a couple of minutes, I feel like functional medicine is that in the healthcare world, okay? Where you're meeting people at their absolute worst. They're at the bottom of the bottom. They have already gone through however many doctors and whatever, right? And you're their last hope, so to speak, and they come to see you. And so you are working with the bloody pulp when they show up, all right? It really intrigues me, okay? So when you are in this situation, you're going through these classes, you're down to the 20% left, all right, 100 guys left. You got 12 courses standing in front of you. How many of you graduate together at the end of that? Do you remember?
I don't think that there was a person I started with that I finished with.
Really?
And it's not because the timelines are different.
Sure.
Right? There's different paths. There's weapons sergeants, there's communication sergeants, there's medics like I was, right? So we're all on different paths. So the courses are longer and shorter in length. And I can't think of one person distinctly that I started with that I finished with.
Okay.
But, I mean, it doesn't mean that everybody I started with didn't graduate.
Right. So let's say it's graduation day, okay? What's that like for you? Is there a sense of pride or honor? Is there a sense of like, oh crap, it's really going to start now? Or are you to a spot where you're like itching to get out? Do you know what I mean?
Everything changes when it comes to the way the instructors and other special forces guys treat you. It's instantly you're part of the brotherhood. Like you're one of us now, we'll take care of you no matter what. Whereas before it's kind of like you got to earn it. Gotcha. You still have to earn it. So the mentality of everybody around you there's a complete shift. And you bond together with guys who, maybe they were the ones beating you down as an instructor, but then immediately they're like, you're one of us now. You are immediately anything you need. I don't care if it's like you're deployed and your wife needs help moving a couch or something. Like,
really,
give me a call. Instant. Boom.
Really? Huh. So when you graduate, is there a token of your graduation, or is it like a piece of paper? What is it?
Well, first off, you get to wear a Green Beret for the very first time. They call it the donning of the Green Beret ceremony.
Okay.
Right? So you're all in formation, and then they just tell you to don them, and you put it on, and
yeah,
it's a big deal. It's
absolutely.
A big deal. Yep. And then they give you what's called a Yarborough knife. It's a big think like Crocodile Dundee knife. It's huge.
Okay.
And it's awesome. I have mine packed away. Obviously, like I don't want it out or visible or anything. Like it's mine. I earned that, and I won't ever use it. It's just
gotcha.
That's my token.
Yarborough. Was Yarborough a soldier? Or
yeah, that's his last name. Yep.
Really?
Yep. So Steve Yarborough.
Okay.
Yep,
so
he's one of the originals.
One of the originals. All right. I looked up. I was in preparing so I could have an intelligent conversation with you. Okay. Mm-hmm. I looked up. I did a little research on the Green Beret, and other than what I've heard from you, all right, and watching Rambo growing up,
yep.
The Green Beret is kind of a silent troop. It's like there is not going to be a bunch of flash websites dedicated to the Green Beret. There's not a bunch of like a cult following of it. It's, to me, in looking at this information, it's like a group of silent warriors that they're not going to talk about what they do. And which I think that's why I think this conversation is so intriguing to me. They're not going to talk about what they do, and it's like it's like a nod of the head, right? Like that's the acknowledgement. It's like almost unspoken between them, from what I can understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you are sitting there, you get your Green Beret, and you graduate the course, and you're in a spot now where you get the stripes on your arms or whatever it is, okay? What is it, by the way? Is there like a badge, a Green Beret badge that you guys have to wear?
They call it a tab, so it's a Special Forces on it, and then you get a special patch on your shoulder.
All right, so you're walking around as one of the guys with the Special Forces tab now, and what is it like? Are you in training, in school, in classes, and you're constantly like getting ready before you get deployed, or what's the process like in that moment?
Yeah, it's a lifestyle that is a true marathon.
A lifestyle.
You're you're either deployed, especially right now.
Yep.
You're either deployed or you're in the next level of training that the team needs you to be. So there's always attrition, right? There's always people retiring. There's always everything else, and your team has to qualify with enough of these different trainings.
Sure.
So I mean, it can be any number of things, depending on what you're up for, what your skills are attuned to do. Maybe it's just getting better at your job for the first year if you're not there, or training
especially as a medic,
or training up your team in that way, right? Because what most people don't realize, what happens if I'm shot?
Yeah, if the medic's shot,
and I'm medic, and I'm like, okay, you guys got to be like hot on this stuff,
right?
Because that's me. Like the only way that I'm getting healed is by you guys, right?
Right.
So the first year can be a very enlightening process, because that's where it becomes real. That's where it becomes, you're learning what a team actually does, not what you're trained to do.
Okay,
right?
so
you think about being in med school versus actually treating patients.
Right.
Maybe I can talk about the exact chemistry of how a process works in the body.
Right.
But to see it on a patient and to get through the way that they maybe horribly explain what the symptom is that's going on with them, that's a completely different story.
Right. Okay.
It's the same idea.
Okay, so you're put into a team. How many people are on a team?
8 to 12. It's supposed to be 12, but
okay,
we can't keep our teams filled because not enough quality people and not enough Just the deployment schedule is so rough.
Okay.
So rough.
So you got 8 to 12 people on a team, and then you're training with that team for your potential deployment.
Correct.
Okay. So
no, it's imminent.
well, I suppose at this point, this point, if they're going to spend that much money on your training, the government is going to spend that much money on your training.
Correct.
That much money making sure that you are who you said you are on paper, and then putting you through the courses. It's going to be imminent.
Imminent. You're going.
Okay. So where were you first deployed as a Green Beret?
Afghanistan.
All right. So you get deployed to Afghanistan, and what's the mission? Like, what's the point?
Well, always to not only go over there and protect your fellow soldiers, but also to bring, for us, it was to bring peace and safety to our area. So however we can do that, whether it is going in there, kicking in doors and cutting down the bad guys, or just winning hearts and minds.
Okay.
Right. So getting them to understand who we were and that we wanted to help and that we could make their lives better just by our presence. Gotcha. Like we weren't like the Russians were 30 years ago. We weren't coming in to just pillage. And we were in places remote enough sometimes where they were like, "Are you guys Russian? We have no idea who you are." And it's like, okay, we've been here for 8 years. How has nobody come to this remote village? Right. I mean, granted, it was like basically impossible to get to.
Right.
But we get there and they're asking us if we're Russian.
Gotcha.
And so sometimes when you're remote and you're out there by yourselves with all these tribes that are at war, think like mob boss Chicago at war with each other because they have been for forever. And you're like, you guys are all a country.
Right.
And they have no concept.
By the way, you're under one flag.
Yeah. And we're just going to appoint, this police chief and they're in charge of all of you. Well, if they're not from our tribe, how is this going to work?
Right.
So you're dealing with just a lot of that, and your entire mentality has to change.
So who are these people, though? Like, to me, sitting in the United States listening to the news, is it Al-Qaeda? Is it ISIS? Who?
Sure.
Okay, so that's what it's like.
They don't know. And so the average person that you talk with,
that's super interesting.
The average person that you talk with, though, the tribal elder, doesn't care about anything except for keeping his family and tribe safe.
Yeah.
Okay. There are the bad guys that are coming in. There are the bad guys that that just decide they want to take power of their tribe, and so they go and attach themselves to whatever hate group.
Sure.
Or whatever, and start causing trouble for everybody, mainly so that they can get power.
So it's kind of opportunistic.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you think about it in the third world. I mean, if the United States tomorrow was all of a sudden third world and all the checks and balances that we have in place, there's going to be people that are going to decide that they want to take over and everything.
Sure.
There's just going to be people who
it
decide
happens right now. There's just checks and balances.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's the exact same way.
Okay.
Except for sometimes this can be, just over firewood or food or candles, right? Because they're still in survival mode. So
your job is to go in and set up camp someplace, a base. Is the camp mobile or is it like...
Depends.
Depends on the mission?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some are more mobile, some are more permanent.
So when you fly into Afghanistan, when you're dropped off for the first day, what was your home base, like the big base? Were you in like Kandahar or what was going on?
Well, for the most part, it just takes you a while to get where you're at because you're so remote. You first fly into what I call an American city in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Right. There's just huge bases because that's where the big jets can land, and then from there you kind of bounce out to whatever remote area you're at, and then
set up an outpost.
Yeah, and for us, we get signed some local Afghans that actually want to make their lives better and make it safer and get rid of the people that have been, destroying their livelihood. And for the most part, most Americans don't know that Afghanistan used to be one of the largest farm product producing countries in the world before the Russians came in. Well, the Russians came in and destroyed a lot. Okay, and I'm not hating on the Russians. It's just history.
What it was, yeah.
And ever since then, the average crop has been forced upon them, which is poppy or something else that doesn't actually provide food for the people.
Right.
And when you have a country that is third world and they rely on, trees for warmth, that long, and there's all this poverty where the other stuff isn't coming in, and there's no other way to heat your house, then firewood becomes scarce. So that was a big one that we had. We dealt with disputes all the time, people killing each other over firewood.
Oh my word!
And so when you think about it from that mentality, where some people remember that they used to have plentiful food, before they were completely destabilized. Some people want that stability again, and other people just want to survive.
So I can see the correlations here in what we're talking about. So you have a group of highly trained guys all guys in your group?
Yes.
Okay. A group of highly trained guys that get deposited into a remote area in the mountains in Afghanistan. Your job is to stabilize it, make sure everybody stops killing each other over simple needs like firewood. But that need to them, that's very basic, you know? Very interesting. All right, so, and people do extreme things over basic needs.
Yes, and there is outside fighters. There's foreign fighters that are brought in, whether they're highly trained guys, which when you're fighting them because, you can just tell where the rounds are hitting, that if they're highly trained or not. And then there's other guys that are coming in that, you're like, okay, this guy he's not a real fighter. And sometimes
you can tell that by how you get shot at.
Yeah. Oh yeah, okay. Big time. So, and those guys, sometimes they were just, maybe their family was kidnapped and they say, hey, if you don't kill the Americans, we'll kill your family. Oh, and so sometimes, we capture these guys, right? Because they're not skilled. They don't know what they're doing. And they put drugs into them even sometimes. So then they're really easy. Wow. But they'll straight up tell you like, hey, they're going to kill my family. Like,
oh my word.
And it's a completely different mentality than most people think that's going on over there.
Okay. So to me, this would be a stressful situation, obviously. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about stress management in that style where you're with your 8 guys out in the mountains and you have that type of a spot, a firefight shows up because some guy is basically being forced into a spot where he's got to go kill the Americans. Okay. You capture him or them and the firefights don't stop. How do you decompress from this situation? Because you've been trained for battle, so you've been trained into a warrior. Does it shut off while you're sitting out in the mountains? Like, what if it's time to sleep? Like, what is that like? Like, how do you know what I'm saying? How do you cope? Because in my mind, it'd be like, all right, you got 48 hours, and then you got to go back and find the Marriott. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm a medic. I don't sleep, man.
Okay.
You don't sleep when you're out there. So, like, a lot of times you go on, like, a long mission or whatever, and either you got in a firefight or you didn't. When you get back, everybody else is decompressing and trying to, like, find their way to sleep. Yeah. And that's when the wounded roll in, right?
Right.
So whether they were the guys that were shooting at you or not, you don't really know. And so it becomes the point where you aren't afforded the luxury of deciphering that, right? Because for me, not helping somebody that I could because I was thinking about the politics or their drive or whatever.
Are they going to try to hurt you?
Yeah. If I'm not focused on what's going on, and maybe this person was a good guy, maybe they alerted somebody that alerted us or whatever, and that got found out, and that's why they're, all shot up. And then I didn't help them because I wasn't focused enough, or and most of the time, I'm so outnumbered patients to me that there's just no time. Like you can't allow yourself to think whether it's going to truly help them or not, because you just have to do what you know what to do, and it becomes muscle memory and just going straight through the mass casualty sequence of who can I help the most immediately, rapidly, and getting through it, because there's not time for anything else.
So I'm going to highlight something here because I think this is amazing. If you're put in a spot where you're going to help whoever shows up, you don't know if that person's going to be the one pointing a gun at you tomorrow, right? And yet you're still going to help them. Either there's two thoughts that I have around that. Either one, it's incredibly humane but ridiculous, okay?
Yeah, it feels that way sometimes.
Right? Or number two, you're so confident in the team around you and your ability to squash a firefight that it's just what you do, right? Like that's
number two is the big one.
Yeah, that's incredible. So when you are with a group of soldiers that you have spent so much time with, that you know them like clockwork, the trust that comes from that, is it strictly from the training, or is it like, how do you know that somebody's going to have your back? You're a medic, right? If you're in a firefight and you're trying to help somebody, and you're going to set your gun down and do what you're supposed to do.
Do what?
Yeah, exactly.
Set my gun down?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know that they're going to make the right decisions? Your team.
Well, that's just it. It's chaotic enough that you don't know that they're going to make the right decision, but you know that they're going to do their best and make the best decision with the information they have.
Uh-huh.
So you don't expect anybody to be perfect. We always strive for it, but don't expect it. And once you're operating at your highest level, you can't operate at your highest level and be perfect. Because you can only find perfection at a level that is too easy for you.
Gotcha. That's we should write that one down. That's a good one.
I already forgot what I said.
That's awesome. So when you're out helping people, what kind of things are you helping them with, other than like my neighbor tried to end my life over firewood or something like that? Like what other types of health conditions do you see while you're out there?
You name it. I had we have a healthcare system that is not perfect, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
Right? It's amazing what we've created. And you see everything over there, from guys with 6 fingers to kids with a broken leg that was never reset, so it looks like a question mark.
Wow.
To a guy dying of gangrene, so his family's throwing him outside because he smells so bad. Just like in the movie The Beach, right, where they throw the guy that's rotting out because they can't smell and listen to him anymore, right?
Yeah.
You see all of that, and we'll do things like, we call them med caps, where you just go into a village and treat everybody, and of course everybody shows up, right? Because you get what you can, but you're looking for those people that you can truly help.
Gotcha.
And the sometimes the hardest cases are the ones that are like, you're all done and you're like, okay, is there anybody else you want us to see? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, there's this guy who's dying over here. I'm like, really? I've just seen 200 people that I gave some multivitamins to. And now you're showing me the guy that like needs immediate attention because he's pretty much dead.
Right.
And then there's there's kids that there was a tetralogy of Fallot case that I did. There was a 12-year-old boy who looked like he was 4. Big blue lips because he's got a big hole in his heart, and so it's not functioning properly. And he was supposed to already be dead according to the local doctors, but there's nothing they could do for him. And you have to kind of finagle your way to get him the help that you need. And
what do you mean?
Use different you can't just like call a chopper and
Yeah.
have him fly into a combat zone and come pick this kid up and go get him his heart surgery, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you gotta pull a lot of strings to make something like that happen, and the locals realize that. They may not understand it, but they can tell when you are putting in that extra effort and really trying to help them.
Like you got that kid evacuated out of there
Yeah,
to go get a heart surgery.
yeah. He actually didn't survive.
Huh.
But we got him his heart surgery, and he perked up for, some months.
Yeah.
And then he was just too far behind, like at that point. I mean, he was 12.
Yeah.
Most tetralogy kids die much younger than that.
Wow.
And so, and his dad skipped one of their appointments because he had to plant his field.
Huh.
So that was kind of the big one. He probably should have had his heart chugs adjusted, and he didn't go to it, and so the kid died. But I mean, it still helped him.
Yeah.
Right. There was still the chance.
Phenomenal to me that, like, I didn't know that happened. I didn't know that happened. Wow. I didn't know that you would do something like that. You know what I mean? Like, here's a kid who's not an American citizen. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, and there was a bunch of different organizations that were in on it. We had, some South Korean physicians that helped us out a lot. There was, I can't even remember a lot of them because I haven't heard of any of them since. Because they're not just American organizations over there.
Gotcha. Okay.
But there's probably in that one, just to get him his surgery, there's probably 6 different organizations working together along with American doctors and South Korean doctors to make it happen.
So
it's quite the effort to get him help.
So how long are you deployed for at a single time? Like, not necessarily in Afghanistan, but
about a year
off the base.
Yeah, about a year.
So you're out in the hills for a year, or are you out in the hills for like a month at a time?
Oh no, like you move in. I mean, you're there. So
not like off of the American city, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so like you build stuff up. I mean, it's not like you're just like you build out an outpost that's easily protected, and it's got the high ground and whatnot. So it's defendable easily, and you have local Afghans that you can, for the most part, trust, helping defend it. And so
when you are when you're tested. Okay, whether it be with a mass casualty situation like you mentioned, or whether it be a firefight and literally you're looking at the eyes of somebody that's trying to end your life, what comes out first? The trained reaction that you have, or like some buried response, like self-protection response? Like I've never had that happen.
Both.
Yeah, I've never had that happen. So what I'm asking is when it's like the most
both.
Extreme stress that somebody could imagine.
Yeah.
Right? What comes out?
Well, the training is beaten into us over and over again. So the immediate reaction is what you've been taught to do, because they work on reestablishing your immediate reaction. So when you react, it's different than what your natural instincts tell you to do.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Huh. Wow. When you have gone through training to basically build up your senses, build up your physical, your ability, your mental ability, tie all of that together, and you're at war, let's say for a year, right, or more, you come home. Are you still amped up? Like, is it something that you can untrain? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to be shopping at Target with that level of, awareness.
Well, here's the deal. So, you ever had too much caffeine, and then you just can't stop your heart from racing? That's kind of what it's like. It like maybe you crash when you truly feel safe, but then you get right back in it and you feel that rush again. So you've spent, and I'll put this in my personal situation, I've spent 3 times in basic training training myself to get hyper alert in high stress situations.
Yeah.
That's before I even learned to jump out of airplanes and become a special forces guy, right? So as I'm going through all the special forces training, everything's high stress, everything's pushed to not make a mistake, everything's pushed to break you. And then you go to combat with that mentality of having to be perfectly prepared, but not perfect in the moment. Just do the best, do the best with your muscle memory. The level of awareness and hyper alertness that's created in you is off the charts. Absolutely off the charts. You're almost addicted to adrenaline.
Why?
You love it. You have to. You have to love the adrenaline. You have to. Otherwise, people just crumble.
Yeah.
So you have to find that love for the adrenaline.
Yeah.
So when you come back and you're supposed to, go to your nephew or your kid's t-ball game,
right,
and just deal with adversity or whatever, political views that are anti this or that and all that, like anything like that, if your body is used to just having, like I'll keep relating it to caffeine, just like a tiny little bit of caffeine.
Yeah.
But now that you've trained it, now you can have, a gallon of straight caffeine and that's what you're used to because that's what your body's used to pumping out for you. Mm. When you're in a normal situation like that, you're going to get that full 10 gallon of caffeine whether you want it or not.
Right.
So basically training yourself, weaning yourself off that caffeine by slowly training your mind to be back in society is just a process that you have to go through over time.
Is it controlled? Is there a set program? There's a program to train you into it. Is there a program to train you out of it?
They're working on it.
Yeah.
They're working on it. So the VA didn't do much for my particular situation. That's why I'm absolutely in love with functional medicine. They try, and we're headed in a lot of right direction, but there's not enough practical application to make it full-fledged. So when I'm talking to guys at the VFW and all that, what I tell them is that I tell them exactly what I just told you, and I said you need to find ways to control your caffeine dump.
Yeah.
And also when you're in it, do exactly the opposite of what you used to do in training.
Right.
Right. So if you're used to doing up-down drills with your rifle, flipping the safety on and off as fast as you can because that might save your life every day. What's the mirror of that to detrain that high level of hypersensitivity?
Gotcha.
Do I need to take a deep breath? Do I need to focus on how incredibly safe I am in the environment that I'm in? Is it the fact that you're like, wait a minute, like it's a t-ball game. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter in the long run.
Right.
And if maybe my kid faces some adversity today or whatever,
right,
that could be something that makes them tougher in the long run. So focusing on that stuff that's going to disengage that hyper alertness and allow that amount of caffeine to just be shrunk each day. And over time, you can retrain yourself instead of being labeled as there's something wrong with you.
Right. Well, can you imagine though? Like, I'm not talking to you because obviously you can imagine, but I'm saying, can you imagine being in a spot where you're trained to essentially, and I'm just going to put it bluntly, kill or be killed, right? And then having to live in a society where, you're at a t-ball game and you hear something, a car door close, or a car accident or something like that, and all of a sudden you are like on fire on the inside again. That's intense.
Yeah. And that's where it's easy for people to label themselves as there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
Like I have PTSD. Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But you can train yourself out of this.
Yeah.
In many ways. And there's different levels of PTSD, and I'm not saying I'm not a specialist in PTSD. I'm just telling you what I've been working with guys with, and me personally has been amazing. And because I just looked at it as there's nothing wrong with me. My body adapted amazingly to one of the worst environments imaginable.
Yeah.
Now it just needs to adapt again over time.
Right.
Back to
first world.
Yeah. Back to the most cush environment imaginable. I mean,
Yeah.
we're living a more cush safe life here in the States than probably it's ever been. In my opinion. I don't know. I don't know the stats, but that's what I tell myself.
But that's your experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's this thing, you mentioned how you enjoy functional medicine, which is obviously why you're talking here today. There's this thing called Task Force Dagger, and I've talked with a gentleman that runs it and that type of stuff, but can you kind of describe what it is and what the need is, why it's there?
Yeah, so it's a program oriented specifically towards special ops and special forces troops. So we're more prone to have more wrong with us due to exposure and just the level of combat and situations that you're in, right?
Like chemical exposure, concussions, all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I got demo pay because we played with demo every single month. 99.5% of soldiers can't say that. So being around those explosions constantly where you're breathing in the dust, you're breathing in whatever is in the dirt that's kicked up in the air, right? I mean, that Afghanistan specific, I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
You're getting more shots. You're getting more exposures.
Like vaccinations, you mean?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And eating local food. Like we did a lot of sitting down with these mob bosses or tribal elders, right? And trying to relate and connect and see what they were thinking and seeing who was a rival tribe, right? Because we don't want those guys working together.
Right.
I mean, eventually we do, but not right away because they might fight and hate each other and somebody might be getting bullied and whatever. Yeah, they turn on us, right? So with all those exposures that we have that the average soldier doesn't have to deal with as much, our needs for healthcare are much higher. So when I got back, I was prescribed 2 different pain meds. One was a muscle relaxer and one was just straight up a pain med.
Sure.
And fast forward a couple of years, I just keep getting sicker and sicker and having more and more issues. And come to find out that I have an infection in my stomach. Which, as we peel back the onion, right, infection in my stomach gets better. We realize that I basically have a leaky gut that is giving me a ton of food allergies, so my immune system's off the charts. Fix all that, peel all that back, something's still not right. Find out that I have a blast injury concussion that never healed because of my just lack of nutrition and stuff getting into me.
Poor oxygenation.
Poor oxygen. Well, you know better than I do, but I do emergency medicine. You're the man. Anyway, and so we just keep peeling back these layers.
Yeah.
Right? And there is nothing that the VA has in place to truly peel back all those layers. They're working on it. They've come a long way. But the level of healthcare that you can get that's truly treating and curing rather than covering up symptoms, that's what Task Force Dagger does. And, like everybody knows about like Gulf War syndrome and like all the issues that are coming from different gases and breathing in fire pits and all that. The functional medicine area is where we're helping these people that can't figure out why they're so sick.
And that's what Task Force Dagger does, is it helps special forces, special ops get functional medicine care.
Yes.
Okay.
And their name originates because they want to be that they're in the military. It's always like tip of the spear, like the leader in that. So they're starting with the people that are most likely to have these issues, and they're paving the way for the rest of the military. So if you want to build case studies, you build the guy that was eating local food,
right?
Burning his own trash, around explosives all the time, jumping out of airplanes. I mean, that's just a whole world of exposures that could have given him issues. And then that breaks into the rest of the military.
Absolutely. Can we talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we found with you?
Absolutely.
Okay. And if there's anything you don't want to talk about, just tell me. Okay.
Okay.
But when we look at some of the chemical exposures that these soldiers are dealing with, high level of plastics. It's not necessarily the exposure, all right? It's the exposure plus your genetic ability to get rid of it. Okay?
Absolutely.
So, but when we look at high levels of plastics exposure, one, because of the explosives you guys are playing with all the time, and then number two, because of the way the food's packaged and it's sitting in, out in the sun all day, right? You might not get to it for a couple of days. It gets airlifted to you. That's a big deal. And looking at a situation where you are on top of your health, okay, like it's been a progressive realization for you, but the fact that you're on top of your health, and there's so many of these special forces soldiers that aren't, one of the things that I am super passionate about is making sure that, it's not about the exposure, it's about can you get rid of it, okay?
Yeah.
And making sure that these people are looked at with some level of a discerning eye, because one of the things that you know as well as I do is that the suicide rate for these special forces soldiers and special ops is insane. Do you remember what the numbers are?
Special forces specific, no, but they're pretty high military wide. I don't remember the exact numbers at all. Just because there's a lot of it's wishy-washy with all the numbers, but a lot of people say 22 a day.
22 a day.
22 a day. That's military wide for suicide. And I know that there's a lot of guys out there who've just given up on ever being healthy again.
Well, I bet.
And that's where it all starts.
I bet. Well, especially when you look at getting your health care from the VA, which isn't supposed to cost you anything, right? But sometimes it costs you your vitality.
Yeah.
And Task Force Dagger, there's some very well-known functional medicine providers that sit on the board of Task Force Dagger. And last time I had checked on this, Dr. Hyman was in there and some of his colleagues. But the point is that Task Force Dagger allows you to get coverages for healthcare as a Special Forces soldier, and so that it doesn't cost you, what it would otherwise. And I think that's a program that deserves to have some level of exposure, which is why I wanted to bring it up today. And just incidentally, if there are any providers listening to this podcast that want more information on it, there'll be a link in the podcast notes below where you can get involved if you like. You can designate yourself, your clinic, as somebody who's willing to participate. And so, again, costs are covered. It's a private organization that does fundraising. So costs are covered by private donation, which I think is pretty cool as well, because then there's a lot more that you can do and say.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
And the greatest part about them is that you get a lot of guys like me that have been through a lot and have trained themselves to walk around in a stupor, a fog, and still function.
Right.
So they're pushed to the point where they've known for a long time something was wrong, but they still may be walking around trying to function as a human being, and are going to be tougher and more disciplined when it comes to going through treatments, which is where a lot of case studies can be built and a lot of progression for functional medicine, I think, is going to really happen. One thing I know about Special Forces medicine in general is that every time that there's a war, there's a major advances in healthcare. Whether it's emergency medicine or whatever, this is our opportunity for functional medicine to really become a mainstream that is impacting many more wives than it already is.
So, well, thank you for being here today. I appreciate it. And you, Nutrition Hero podcast family, have been listening to Jeff Wilds, Sergeant in a Green Beret, retired now. But I appreciate your service. I appreciate your time and your attention today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thanks for being around.